Hey boys and girls, welcome to the Demented Robot Games YouTube channel. My name is Boris, and yes, today my dreads are tied behind my head. That's the first time I'm doing this. I really don't know what's happening to me, okay? Anyway, I hope you've been playing a lot of games lately. I know I haven't. Unfortunately, I've been kind of busy lately, had a lot of stuff going on, but nevertheless, today, as always, I want to show you a game that may potentially be interesting for you guys. So, the game we're talking about today is this guy here, Clank, a deck building adventure game. Okay, this is a game for 1 to 4 players. This is a very interesting game because it's in its essence a deck builder. Okay, so its core, its foundation is the deck building mechanic, but this game is so much more than just a deck builder because this game has a board on which you'll be able to move. This game is essentially almost like a dungeon crawling game, almost like an adventure game fueled by the deck building mechanism. So it's very, very interesting. So in this game, the story goes like this. I'm going to leave the box. I don't want to be holding it all the time, okay? Now in this game, you will take on a role of a group of adventurers slash thieves, however you want to see them, and you will compete with the other thieves from the area who's going to go and get more treasure from the dungeon. There is a dungeon below the keep in the area, and it's a maze of tunnels and caverns, and it is said to hold a vast treasure there. So you are all going to be going in, trying to get a treasure, and get back to the surface without being burned by who? The dragon, because of course the dungeon would not be a dungeon without one huge danger that's waiting there, which is a dragon in this case. The dragon is sleeping, but as you stumble your way across the dungeon, you are making noise. The more noise you make, the more awake the dragon becomes and more dangerous. So the dragon, as he awakens, is going to start doing damage to you guys, okay? And that's one additional thing that is going to represent a challenge and an obstacle. Anyway, you will be going into the dungeon trying to get a valuable artifact. You can only carry one, by the way. When you find one, you are eligible to head back to the surface. Whoever survives without being burned to a crisp by Mr. Dragon will calculate their points. Whoever has calculated more money and goods, and of course the value of their artifact and many different things that you can collect in this game, will be the winner. So whoever has taken more loot than the other guys is going to be the winner. So that's a very general concept of this game, okay? In this game you will be deck building, you will be moving across the dungeon, fighting monsters, you will be searching for an artifact, you will be trying to evade the dragon, but occasionally the dragon is going to deal damage to you. And you will try to head back to the surface and be better and richer, basically, than the other guys. That's just a general concept of the game. In the following section, as always, I'm going to show you how the game looks and how it works. So let's do that. Okay guys, this is how the game looks like when it's set up on the table. Obviously we have two segments here. We have our deck building segment, where we purchase new cards and build our decks. I'm going to assume you guys know what deck building is because I don't want to waste too much time explaining how deck building works. If you don't know how deck building works, Google it up, okay? So this is the deck building aspect of your game. These are cards that can be purchased. Here we have 6 cards drawn from this pile of cards here. This is your dungeon deck, the way it's called in this game. And here we have 3 piles of cards that are constantly on the table, okay, that can constantly be purchased. And here we have one monster that can always be fought. This guy never is never discarded from the table. There can be other monsters appearing here from this deck, but we're going to speak about that later. So this is the deck building aspect of the game. Everybody gets their 10 cards. That's your beginning deck, and as always, it's pretty weak. Everybody gets cubes in their color. These are going to represent damage you take from the dragon, this guy here. Okay, so every player will get their own supply of cubes in their color. And we will have our supply of money, which you will earn primarily for killing monsters in the game. That's going to be your reward. And each money is going to be worth 1 point at the end of the game. So you can earn quite a bit like this by fighting monsters mostly. And then we will have another aspect of our game, which is the board. That's why this deck building game is so important, because we move on the board. So basically, we're going to play our cards, and powers those cards will have, we are going to use on the board. So there's a whole new level of the game by crawling this dungeon and trying to determine your strategy in the game. Here on the board, we will have our chambers and our rooms. We will have our passages. This is essentially a maze, a dungeon that we are going to find our way through it and take the artifact. The main goal of the game is for each guy here, each guy is going to have meeple here, as you can see. Each guy in the game is going to go down into the dungeon and try to retrieve one of these guys, these artifacts, these hexagonal tokens, okay? These artifacts are going to have value at the end of the game, but also you cannot get back to the surface if you don't have one artifact in your hand. So if you don't have one, you cannot go back. And why do you want to go back? Because you want to survive. Why? Because this dragon is going to attack you and deal damage to you. So you want to get an artifact at one point, and at one point start going back to the surface, okay? So that's what you want to do. But in these rooms, you're going to have a lot of things. You're going to have these minor secret tokens that you can uncover. These are good for you. Those are items and good stuff for you. But you also have these major secret tokens, these bigger question mark tokens. They are going to hold even more valuable stuff, okay? Each time you find yourself in a room, you can pick one and one token only for yourself like this, okay? So you're going to be moving across this board, trying to get an artifact and get back to the surface. Whoever survives the game at the end and has most points in money, artifacts, and other good stuff, it will be the winner of the game. So that's the general gist of the game. Now, you will determine the first player, okay? The guy who's going to play first. That guy is going to place 3 cubes of their color here in the Clank area. Next player is going to take 2 cubes. If there's a third player, they're going to take only 1 cube, and the final player won't put any cubes here, okay? So whoever goes first has head start, but they will take potentially more damage. That's the balance in the game, okay? Now, the first player is going to take 5 cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, from their starting deck of 10 cards. That's going to be their hand, and they're going to play those cards on the table. All cards must be played, but you can play them one by one or all together in any order you want, however you see fit, okay? These cards are going to have 3 main abilities. Either purchasing power, it's the blue number here on the card, in the upper left corner, if you can see. Or a card is going to have a movement. It's this yellow boot that you can see on the card. I hope you can. Or a card can have these swords, these red swords. I hope you can see that on the card. Those are attacking abilities, okay? So, purchasing power, this blue number, will allow you to purchase new cards and do your deck building, essentially. Each card that can be purchased will have a number here in the lower right corner, which will tell you how much that card costs to be purchased from the table, okay? You can either purchase these 6 cards from this deck or these cards that are constantly on the table. If any of these piles run out, of course, they are not available anymore. So you have to have enough purchasing power between all the cards that you've played to meet or exceed this limit here on the card, and then you can take that card and put it into your discard pile. This is now your card. You know how it works. When you shuffle your discard pile, all these cards will become yours, essentially. Okay, the second thing you can do is move. So you can use one of these yellow boots, as you can see on this card, to move on the board. Okay, you can either move through these straight corridors which have no icons on them. You will simply spend one of your boots to move through these. But some of them will cost you 2 movement to go. You see these with 2 boots will cost you 2 boots to move. Those are more difficult passageways, okay? Some of them will even be locked. For example, this guy has a lock on it. You can only pass through it if you have one of these master keys, and you can buy them from this marketplace here. Some corridors have monsters, in which case you will either suffer the damage equal to the amount of monsters or counter that damage with your swords. That's one of the things you can do with your swords, okay? And some passageways are one-way passageways. For example, this guy here has an arrow, which means that you can move in this direction, but you cannot return back the same way. Okay? Also, when you end your movement in one of these crystal caverns, you immediately stop moving. So even if you have more boots, you cannot continue moving. So that's how these things work. Okay? That's how you move across the dungeon. And then finally, you have your swords, as I told you. So you see that this card has swords. So if you have this card, you can attack. Okay? When you play your cards on the table, the total of your swords between those cards is your total attacking power, and then you can attack monsters. You can either attack this goblin here, who is constantly on the table, or you can attack one of the monsters that will appear from this deck here. When you defeat a monster, you do not take it. You just defeat the monster, get it out of the game into the discard pile, and you get a reward. A monster will always have a reward. For example, this goblin will give you 1 gold when you defeat it. And you need to have 2 swords to defeat this goblin. You will see that in the lower portion of the card. So you will defeat the monster, take the reward, and then discard the card. All except this goblin, who is not discarded. He's constantly on the table. And then finally, what you can do with these swords, with these red swords, you can you can use them to prevent taking damage from these passageways. For example, if I want to go from this crystal cavern into this space here, I will have to pass through here, and there are 2 monsters here. So I will either suffer 2 damage or spend these 2 swords to prevent that damage from happening. I can always take the damage even if I have swords, if I want to save my swords for something else. So that's how you play your cards, either for its purchasing power, or for the card's movement point, for the boot, or for the swords, or all of the above, because this card gives me purchasing power, for example, and gives me a boot at the same time. You know? So you use all those cards, you resolve all their effects. But there's one more thing these cards do, and that thing is not so good. These cards create clank. I don't know if you can read it on this card. In the lower portion it says +1 clank. Cards that create clank create noise. Whenever you play a card like that, you will have to place as many cubes as it says here in the clank area. Okay? And you are potentially going to get hurt later. Okay? So when you play all 5 cards and resolve all their effects, your turn is done. Then you will replenish cards that are missing from the table. And you will see whether any of those cards has a dragon symbol. This card, for example, has this yellow dragon, if you can see it. You know, if any of the cards that are replenished on the table from this pile has a dragon on it, then the dragon immediately attacks. What you will do then, will see where this dragon is, okay, where this dragon is, and draw that many cubes from the bag. In this case, 3 cubes. But first, you're going to take all cubes that are here in the clank area, you're going to put them in the bag, in this beautiful dragon bag that comes in the game. You will place these cubes in the bag, and then you are going to shuffle them. And in this case, we're going to draw 3 cubes. So 1, it's a red cube. Red player gets a damage and places it here on the damage track. Second cube is a black cube. It's a dragon cube, but nothing happens. You simply set it aside somewhere. And then the third cube is also black. We ignore that, but it's out of the bag, okay? So in this particular case, red player got 1 damage. Whenever you reach the end here, you are knocked out, okay? And depending on where you are, it will have different results. I will get to that shortly, okay? So that's how we play. We play our 5 cards, resolve their effects, replenish cards. The dragon potentially attacks. If there are no cards here with the dragon symbol, the dragon does not attack, okay? We are going to move across the board. We're going to play in the clockwise direction. How does the game end? Sooner or later, one of the players is going to get one of these artifacts. When you have an artifact, you can start heading back to the surface. Otherwise, you cannot return to the surface. But when you get one of these guys, you head back, and you're trying to reach the surface here, the beginning, okay? So when you do that, you're going to try walking back here, and sooner or later, one player will be the first to reach the surface. When that happens, this player does not play cards anymore. Each time this player's turn happens, he or she is instead going to move on this track. And this is our timer until the end of the game. First turn, nothing's going to happen. Next time this guy goes, they will simply do this, and then the dragon will attack, but +1 cube is going to be drawn from the bag. During his next turn, the dragon is again going to attack with 2 additional cubes. And then finally 3 additional cubes, and then finally, when he reaches this space, the dragon is going to knock out everybody else who hasn't yet reached the surface. Whoever reaches the surface, who comes all the way out of the dungeon, will get one of these tokens. That's +20 points for you. That's quite a bit, okay? So this guy is going to have 20. But if somebody else reached the surface in the meantime, before the end of the game, this guy would also get one of these tokens, okay? When this guy who first reached the surface reaches this final spot, the dragon knocks out everybody else who's still in the dungeon. Whoever is below the surface of the ground, this line here, is going to be dead. They are immediately defeated and their points are not going to be calculated. This guy is immediately eliminated. Whoever is above the ground level will get knocked out, but they will be saved and their points will be calculated, but they will not get additional 20 points for reaching the surface. Whoever else has reached the surface gets +20 points. Whoever is still alive at the end of the game will calculate their points. The value of their artifact, the value of the money they have in their possession, the value of cards that have a green number in the upper right corner, the number of other stuff they have that may be of worth. Everything's going to be calculated. Whoever has most points will be the winner of the game. If there is a tie, a player with a more valuable artifact will be the winner. And that's how this game works. I haven't told you everything about it, but you have a pretty good idea about how it functions. Now, in the final section of the video, I'm going to share with you guys some of my final thoughts. So let's do that. Okay, so you've seen how the game looks and how it works, okay? Now, what do I think about the game? These are my final thoughts, of course. You don't have to listen to me. You had your chance to see how the game works in the previous section of the video, so you can make your own decision. But if you want to listen to me, keep watching this video if I haven't bored the hell out of you up to this moment, okay? So what do I think about this game? Let me tell you, this is a fabulous game, okay? Because of its originality, you know? I mean, I've always loved good deck builders, but this game is so much more than a deck builder. You know, it says a deck building adventure on the box, but I really think it's an understatement in this case, because this is far, far more. This goes far beyond a simple deck builder. Yes, the core of the game is deck building mechanics, almost classical deck building mechanism. And that's the foundation of the game. But the whole dungeon thing, right? The fact that you have a board, the fact that cards do not decide what you do. They give you powers, but how you use those powers is entirely up to you. How you move across the dungeon, which paths you take. Do you take the easy path or the more lucrative path, or try to combine both? How deep you're going to go, which artifact you're going to take. If you take that super expensive artifact, it means you went way down into the dungeon and you won't have enough time, possibly, to get back to the surface before the dragon burns you. So you are risking to just lose the game automatically without even being allowed to calculate your points. If you take a cheap artifact, then you must make sure that you end the game very quickly before other guys have had enough time to catch up with you, you know. Or you can take a cheap artifact and make sure that you have beaten a lot of monsters and taken a lot of other treasure to make up for the fact that your artifact is not worth much. So your strategic and tactical possibilities here are huge, and they're not fully determined by cards, because it is you who decides what to do on the actual board. And on top of it all, we have this beautiful mechanical design in this game where you use these cubes as you create noise. So the guy who has created more noise has a chance of getting hurt badly and ending the game prematurely and stuff like that. So the whole game just works like a well-oiled machine. It's a really, really interesting game. It's a good deck builder plus a lot more. And it's very exciting. The decisions that you have to make, that you get to make as a player, are super exciting. And the game is just very, very fun to play. And ultimately, that's the reason why we play games, right? Because we want to have fun. So ultimately, if the game is fun, it's a good game. If it's not fun, it's not a good game, period. So this game is a fabulous, fabulous playing experience. I still have to play more of it. I've played a couple of games up to this point, but I loved every single one, okay? So this is a really, really original and almost, maybe this is a slight overstatement, but this feels to me almost like a revolutionary game because combining deck building with so much other stuff is really, really super cool. Let's mention a couple of other things. Well, the game looks good visually. I mean, the box is cool. The components are really, really nicely done. I love the artwork and I love how it embellishes and makes the game interesting, but it's at the same time very unassuming. It's not too complicated and too pretentious, you know? There's a right balance of the game looking beautiful but not being too overburdening, I guess. And it also the artwork gives this lighthearted, fun atmosphere to the game. You know, the game may have been dark and grim with a dark and grim artwork, but no, this is a lighthearted game, and the artwork just adds that element. It does a wonderful job of getting you into the game without taking it too seriously. So it really works for me. The theme of the game is nothing new, going into the dungeon and getting treasure, in the meantime killing monsters and being hurt by the monsters and dragons and whatnot. I mean, the theme is nothing new, definitely, but it works very well for this game, okay? It's very well integrated with mechanisms that exist in the game, so I actually love the theme because it works for me. It just works nicely. Number of players is cool, 2 to 4. I mean, maybe a 3-player game and a 4-player game are more exciting than a 2-player game. But, you know, if you have nobody else to play, you can play with 2 and still have a good deal of fun. So I loved a 2-player game as well. So it works well. The duration of the game, I don't even remember how long the game will typically last. It says up to an hour here on the box. And I think it's good. For a game which has so much going on, an hour-long game is not too long either. So I think duration time is also good. Replayability, I think, is huge, you know, because first of all, you have 2 sides to the board. So there are 2 different dungeons that look differently and function differently as you play. You know, the distribution of cards, how they come up from the dungeon deck is going to be different every time. And of course, as players, you're always going to make different decisions and influence the game differently. And so I think the game is really replayable. You can play this game a lot before you lose your interest, if you ever lose your interest. So this is a really cool game that way. All in all, a really nice game. I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm going to wrap up. A really interesting, fun, exciting game, and really original. It takes deck building to a whole new level. It adds something that other designers should strive to do with their deck builders as well. It shows us that a deck building mechanism can be so much more than simply cards and the luck of the draw or whatever. Okay, so a really wonderful game. I warmly recommend it. I'm giving it 2 thumbs up. You guys should definitely look into it. And that's it from me for today. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this video was helpful. Thank you for all the shares and likes and subscribes. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Tell your friends about the channel. And that's it. And for the end, play or be played. Just don't stop playing. Okay? Goodbye.